Thank you, Mr. Bavay. Thank you for your statement. We will now begin the questioning. Members are going to be limited to 5 minutes, but we may have additional rounds of questions. I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Let's start with Mr. Spizak. Do you think that the current laws for helium extraction on federal lands are up to date and conducive for modern day helium production operations?
Well, generally the current laws and regulations are set up more for these large-scale natural gas-based development where you have a significant resource available that could support the infrastructure needed to develop the helium. As smaller prospects are identified, and as we're talking here from the panel, some of the newer technologies that are able to develop a lower-grade helium, the regs aren't quite set up that way. We generally, by maintaining ownership from federal mineral estate, it's set up to be able to aggregate at the point where the helium is being processed and being able to extract it. And some of the difficulties we've had in the past, and one of the requirements that we require of these smaller projects is to ensure that there's a unification of the natural gas rights, and so we have the helium contract. So that's one of the kind of the workarounds that we've developed to continue or to allow these smaller prospects to go. So I think the current rules and regulations we can make do, but certainly any type of modernization would help facilitate that going forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Guberlet, can you explain the difference in the processes and the cost between natural gas production and helium production in less than 3 minutes?
In standard oil and gas operations, in many cases you actually don't need natural gas processing facilities to allow you to sell your products. However, in those helium-related projects, you're always going to have other components of the natural gas that need to be removed from the stream before you can have commercially available helium supplies. Mm-hmm. CO2, nitrogen, H2S, methane, and so forth. All of those can be very costly to separate from the helium stream. And as you go further and further downstream with the various components, pressures and temperatures get greater and greater, or lower and lower in terms of temperature-wise. So it just becomes that much more complex and of course costly to remove those other components before you have a helium product that is available for the market. Can
you give us an idea in terms of the cost, a percentage cost change at these different points you talked about, vis-a-vis just natural gas processing?
Depending on the components, H2S and CO2 are incredibly costly to remove. You could have upwards of 30 to 50% increase in your capital costs, just depending on the amount of those individual products. Nitrogen rejection units are another very, very costly technology that you have to employ. So, depending on the particular components of the gas, it's easily upwards of 50%.
How about the variable cost? I mean, how much of a variable cost difference is there? You talked about fixed capital costs, but how about variable cost?
Well, variable cost, the systems that are employed to remove H2S and CO2 have a significant variable cost component: electricity, power, and the solutions themselves that are employed to remove these products. So you can have a very significant variable cost component, operating expense component to these facilities, and that's why, as we've discussed here, historically you've gone after the high concentrations of helium prior to, or now, I guess we're chasing the lower concentrations just because of all these cost issues that you've referred to.
Okay. Mr. Sears, in your testimony, you said that you nominated a federal acreage for a standard oil and gas lease in February of 2011, and you waited nearly 2 years for that acreage to be put up for auction. And so I've got 4 questions in that line. The first one is, were you given any reason why the wait was so long?
Not given any reason whatsoever.
And do you feel that anything can be done to expedite the process that land is made available for helium exploration and production?
I would imagine it all boils down to field visits, field work, and that type of activity.
Okay. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to come back to you in the second round of questions, and we'll come back to this one. So with that, I'm going to recognize Mr. Lowenthal for 5 minutes.
Representative Flores will go first.
Well, thank you, Chairman Lamborn. I'd like to remind Mr. Cartwright that the Department of Energy spending levels that we set last night are the same as 2007, and the world wasn't coming to an end in 2007. Mr. Spears, I'd like to continue the line of questioning we had with you regarding the 2-year delay it took for you to get a lease. And my next question on that subject was, would it be more beneficial for the helium industry if we made helium a leasable mineral similar to oil and gas?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Spizak, do you have any comments on that?
I think it really has to be hand in hand with the technology issue, because the experience that we ran, we tried to lease out helium prospectively back in the early 1990s, and the helium lessee, the person that won that, wasn't able to get an agreement with the natural gas lessee, which they had to be able to work together to be able to produce together. And we wasted basically 10 years trying to work some accommodation that we didn't really have a needle to kind of push them along. And so there are challenges with that approach.
Have you continue on this helium leasing and helium permit processing question for a minute? We know a couple of facts. We know that helium is essential to U.S. industry, and number two is we're going to close the reserve in the near future. So in light of that, does BLM give any sort of priority processing for NEPA reviews or APD applications for helium exploration?
Nothing has been identified as far as the priority processing. It's basically the oil and gas leasing process that is being dealt with.
One of the things that sort of bothers me is that we have a fast-track process for wind and solar, and it seems to me like we ought to have a similar process for helium since it's such a critical element. Would you agree with that?
That could be something that could be considered, but I could take that back.
Thank you. I yield back.